This week, we're in Washington, D.C. with the Lion's official White House correspondent, Maggie for all the latest from the White House. Senator Eric Schmitt goes one-on-one with the Herzog Chairman, Todd Graves, on his brand new book, and government lawfare and surveillance against not just members of Congress, but many American citizens as well. And the Lion panel weighs in as they do each and every week on all the latest news at readlion.com. That's all straight ahead from the Lion Week in Review in Washington, D.C. Next. Welcome into this week's edition of the Lion Week in Review, a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stigall, live at the news desk here in Washington, D.C. And whenever we stop in Washington, D.C. for a special visit, we always like to check in with our Lion correspondent from D.C. In studio with me today, Maggie Little. Maggie, welcome to the show. Good to see you in person.
Yeah, good to see you as well.
So it's rare we actually get to see you here in your environs here in D.C., but would love to talk with you a little bit about what you've been covering at the White House for the Lion lately.
Yeah, of course. So my last day in the White House on the pool was last Friday. We went with President Trump to his physical exam at Walter Reed Medical Center.
Oh, this is a biggie. Okay,
yeah.
So there's been a lot made about this visit by a lot of people that would suggest he has health problems, the bruising, the ankles. We've heard this, and people said that this was unusual because it was too close to the last time he visited. So what do you know? What are you hearing?
Yeah, there was a lot of speculation about why he was getting a physical after he was there in April, but we saw the report come back from his physician. It looked like he was in very good health. And just if you're a reporter seeing him, I mean, he is always on the go. It's hard to imagine that he has some crippling condition or something hindering him. He's always on it. I even hear reporters from CNN and other outlets talking about how he's never sleeping. He's always working pretty much. And that's something we saw, at Walter Reed. We weren't obviously in the room with him, and he also gave remarks to the troops, and those were closed to the press. But we saw him land and go in. We saw him in the car waving to the press. He's just very with it.
Is there anything about this White House, and it's interesting because this week it's also come up, the new rules at the Pentagon, and I don't know how familiar you are with that story. I won't press you on it because that's not what you're here to talk about, but they're trying to gin up the idea that somehow this is becoming a more controlled administration, that media doesn't have the access they should or something. I mean, sincerely, there's so much media, and I think that this administration generally, at least in my opinion, is so available to so much media. I don't see it. Do you see it as somebody covering the White House?
Yeah, within my own experiences of the White House, I don't see that. I mean, I was, just in the Oval Office. There's tons of new faces and new voices around. One thing that also kind of struck me as interesting on Friday's trip was I was in the van at Walter Reed with all these White House reporters from all sorts of mainstream media outlets. And in live time, we saw Truth Social come out from Trump saying about China and all the rare earth elements that they were threatening. And we were all shocked, and everyone was like, oh, did you see what he said on Truth Social? And I just thought it was a really interesting moment because I'm here with all of these White House reporters, veteran reporters, and we're literally traveling with Trump to his medical appointment, and we're all finding out in live time on Truth Social just like the rest of the public. So I thought that really spoke to some of his transparency and just how accessible he is, that you have all of these people with him still finding out as the rest of the public would be finding out about some of these things.
Is that your impression with Truth Social? It's fascinating that you bring that perspective, because I think maybe a lot of us would assume because you're traveling with him, maybe you're privy to information. But literally when he posts something on Truth Social, members of the media that are traveling with him are often reading that in real time, just like we are on our phones.
Yeah, I've seen that happen multiple times. On Friday, everyone had no idea about the China stuff, and we're all reading it in live time. Like, did you see what he just posted? So I just think that kind of speaks to some of the transparency that you're seeing.
They said that when he was holding an event, I forget exactly what the event was at the White House, when Marco Rubio came in and whispered into his ear famously that they'd struck a deal on Middle East peace. Someone had taken a shot of Marco Rubio's notes to him, and on the notepad it said, "We're ready for you to put out a truth about this and such." So the note from Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State to the President, was, "We'd like you to issue a statement on social media." I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I saw people kind of zooming in to try to see what that note said as well. Yeah, so I think it's a little hard to buy that there's some sort of like we're being blocked out when I'm traveling with him to his doctor appointment, and I'm also with all these other White House reporters finding out about things in live time, just like anybody who has Truth Social downloaded on their phone.
And I know you're an honest broker and reporter, so you'd tell us, just to be clear, I'm doubling down on the question, anything you're hearing that would suggest he's not in good health?
Not anything that I've heard. You know, I looked through his report from the doctor. It all looked pretty good to me. So yeah, obviously he wasn't actually in the appointment with him. I don't, you know, but everything I'm hearing is fine.
ReadLion.com is where you can get all of Maggie's reporting from here in D.C. You also talked and wrote a little bit about this Middle East trip, which was just huge. And then he turns right around and comes back for a Charlie Kirk memorial and celebration there in the Rose Garden. But let's talk about that trip. I mean, whirlwind trip, unbelievable accomplishment. You know, he speaks in the Knesset, then he goes to Egypt, and he's greeted by both parties warmly. That's something in history, at least since I've been alive, presidents don't do.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing to see like more than 20 countries gathered there for the peace summit. Seeing just the hostages being released after 2 years, definitely a historic moment. It seems to be holding so far. And yeah, we saw, like you mentioned, he raced back across the globe to get to the Charlie Kirk Medal of Freedom ceremony. So I thought that really kind of spoke to how important that was to the president, especially getting there by his birthday.
You know, another thing in between, I think, in between that peace deal and the Charlie Kirk event, I think he had a cabinet meeting in there, if memory serves, where lots of the media pour into those cabinet meetings and they make themselves available. That was another moment this week where he shouts at the ABC reporter. He got very angry about the way George Stephanopoulos had treated J.D. Vance on their visit on the Sunday show. And so he told the ABC reporter, "I'm not talking to you." And this got the press very upset as another sign of, you see, they're shutting out the press.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I said, it's sometimes a little hard to buy some of those arguments when you see just how often we're around him. He's constantly having events open to the public. I've had some friends who served under the Biden administration as reporters, and they said there would be days where it said, no public events scheduled, no public events scheduled, and it was kind of a lot slower day to day. And in this White House, you just never know when you're going to be pulled into the Oval Office for another event, another press conference. So.
Gentleman that I talked to from time to time, Steve Moore, an economist, was sharing with me that he was visiting with President Trump privately on some economic issues. The president liked so much what Steve was saying, he said, "I want you to talk to the press about this," and literally called in the press corps, and Steve gave an impromptu kind of economics lesson to a media audience. That he didn't go there to talk to the media, but the president wanted him to your point.
Yeah, there's been times where I've been just sitting around waiting for them to let us know the next move, and all of a sudden over the speakers they're like, "Get in the Oval Office now, like line up at the doors," and so you just kind of never know what to expect.
What about the decorations at the White House? I have noticed, just while I've got you, I think this is a fascinating component that maybe we don't spend a ton of time on, but it's interesting. The president is very interested in leaving his mark well after he's gone, from the gilding, I know that some have had trouble with, but the flagpoles, and now, like a 90,000 square foot ballroom he's working on. He had a lot of very wealthy people in this week to have a private dinner, I think, that maybe some of them are contributing to that, but it's all private donations.
Yeah, and you can tell he's very proud of it. He even just this week, he's opened a number of his press conferences, and even I think the Charlie Kirk ceremony, he opened with just talking about how beautiful the grounds were and the work he's trying to do there. So you can tell yesterday in the Oval Office, he was talking about how beautiful his renovations are. So I think it's something that's kind of top of his mind.
I was really thinking, because partisanship is so ugly, do you imagine that a Democrat president would come in and try to undo it? I guess there's some things you could do and some you couldn't undo.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if they did. I mean, it definitely has kind of a Trump mark on it. I've stayed in a few of his hotels, and it kind of has a similarity, like his style. You can definitely see it. So I wouldn't be shocked. Finally,
the Charlie Kirk event. This was a really remarkable thing. A lot of high-profile members of the media were gathered there in the Rose Garden. Your just thoughts on it generally?
Yeah, I thought it was beautiful to see his wife Erica Kirk accepting it on his behalf. Just the fact that Trump talked about how he almost tried to push it off or delay the event, but he knew it was Charlie Kirk's 32nd birthday, so how important it was for him to be there. I thought it was really touching when Erica talked about how this is the best birthday gift he could ever have, and how Charlie wasn't a materialistic person at all, and she always struggled to find him birthday gifts. So I thought it was kind of beautiful to watch just the impact he obviously made as a private citizen.
And the first, as I understand it, the first Medal of Freedom ever with a cross engraved on the back.
Yeah.
I heard.
Yeah, and also he's the first one to actually receive the medal this in Trump's second term. So I thought that was also interesting.
Very interesting. Maggie Little reports on all of these things at readlion.com from Washington, D.C. So when we're here at the news desk in D.C., it's always a privilege to get to talk to you in person. Thanks for the work that you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Also this week on a special edition of Lion Week in Review, Senator Eric Schmitt paid a visit to our parent organization, the Herzog Foundation, and sat down with the head of the Herzog Foundation's board, Todd Graves. They're old legal colleagues as well. He's the former Attorney General of Missouri, now a United States Senator, and gave a great talk. And it was wide-ranging, but we thought we'd let you listen in on a little bit of it. We'll have some reaction also coming up from our panel.
People say sometimes that power corrupts. I'm not sure that's totally true. It can, but power reveals. Mm-hmm. And during that time, there were a lot of people, and all of us can have our own stories about how we saw it unfold, who had positions where they had a little bit of power and they abused it in ways that were unimaginable in this country. Mm-hmm. And really, that's kind of why I thought the story was important to tell. There's many things that are even outside of COVID. Biden, we can talk a lot about it, but it was this instance where the authoritarian impulse of the left was on hyperdrive, and they felt like they could do things that were unimaginable in this country, and we saw it play out in local schools. We saw it play out nationally. Mm-hmm. It happened here in Kansas City. You saw mask mandates, and so really this was a time. The book is kind of in the setting of a time, and it's interesting now that we're kind of on the other side of that fever dream. Mm-hmm. In some ways, President Trump's in office. There's a lot of great things that are happening. But a year ago, we were in a much different place. Like, it's sort of, we take it for granted to some degree now, but we were this close to losing it all. And it was a time of, mandatory mask mandates, compulsory COVID shots, a censorship regime we've never seen before, open borders, DEI struggle sessions, CRT in our schools. All this stuff was happening. And people felt like that something had to be done, and I just happened to be in a position as Attorney General where I could do something about it, and we stood up and we fought back and we won.
The mask mandate. Yes. The mask mandate was particularly interesting because I live north of here and I work downtown, and when I would stop during mask times, downtown everybody had a mask on. If you'd stop halfway between Smithville and downtown, fewer people would have masks. And by the time you'd get a little bit north of here, nobody had masks.
Yeah, right.
They didn't,
right.
They didn't get COVID up there. They only got COVID. So it kind of...
Well, the Lake of the Ozarks saw like a 300% increase in business when these videos went viral of people not wearing masks in pools having a good time. Yeah.
But you've held the entire legal power of the state of Missouri in your hands. What do you wish that everybody knew about the Attorney General's office or the capability of the Attorney General's office that you didn't know before you had that authority?
I mean, it's an immense responsibility. You're the chief legal officer of the state. You're in charge of you can, I think, I wrote this book about the things that we did. You could write another book about the things that we didn't do because there wasn't enough evidence. And I think you have to have some restraint and a North Star that justice is important and the rule of law is important because it can be weaponized. We saw that happen under the Biden administration, right? I mean, you saw, and I was in a Judiciary Committee hearing this last week when Pam Bondi was there in the Oversight Committee. You heard the Democrats talking about weaponization, and you can see it. You can go on. It kind of went viral, and I had 10 minutes to ask Pam questions, and I used about 8 of them just to go on this thing of, you have to be kidding me, right?
Right.
Were you living in the same country that I was living in? Let me tell you a little bit of story. What happened in 2016, Hillary Clinton was worried about her email scandal. They made up with the Soros Foundation organization a story to distract from her email problems about Trump being a Russian asset. And they came up with the Steele dossier, and they sold it to intelligence agencies. The intelligence agencies knew it wasn't true. Obama used it to spy on Trump. Trump wins. They continue to use it to try to sideline his presidency. The FBI then, when they can't let him win again, so the Hunter Biden laptop story gets suppressed. And then Biden comes in 3 days in, he starts the censorship regime, he starts Arctic Frost, which goes after members of Congress and any Republican. I was in the AG Association at the time, went after that. Charlie Kirk's organization went after them. All to sideline a movement. And then they thought President Trump was on the run. Then, 3 days after he announces he's running for president, Jack Smith arrives, Fani Willis arrives, Alvin Bragg arrives. They tried to throw him in jail for the rest of his life. So please, I don't need any lectures about weaponization. We saw the worst case of it in American history. What they did to this country was 100 times worse than Watergate. So anyway, I just think that now more than ever, Todd, we just have to have the courage to stand up and speak out. And really, that's the story of the book. I mean, we took the vaccine mandate cases. Missouri led the charge. We took that to the Supreme Court, and we won. We took the student loan debt forgiveness case. Missouri did. We took it to the Supreme Court, and we won. We filed the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit. When everybody thought that censorship from the left and big tech was a conspiracy theory, we filed the lawsuit. We got the discovery. We found out it was true. And, the rest is history. So the lesson, ultimately, it's sort of a field manual of what it was like to take on the left-wing lawfare machine. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, it's a playbook, because it's not the last time we're going to see this kind of excess from the left. And I think the lesson is you got to have the guts to stand up.
A one-on-one conversation with Senator Eric Schmitt, his brand new book, The Last Line of Defense. When we get back on the Lion Week in Review from Washington, D.C., we'll go back to Lion headquarters and speak to the panel, get their reaction to these conversations and all the news headlines. Next on the Lion Week in Review. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. If you've missed any of today's show or any previous show, you can always catch us on YouTube. And of course, all the stories and all the news we discuss here are always at readlion.com. Because it was a bit of a special show today, we moved the panel discussion to our second segment of the show, and we welcome in the panel, as we always do, Michael Ryan, our executive editor, Josh Mann is managing editor at The Lion, and Michaela Estruth is reporter with The Lion. Panel, it's great to be with you. Sorry I can't be with you in studio, but good to be with you from Washington. I know you were all monitoring the conversation with Senator Schmitt and the chair of the Herzog Foundation, Todd Graves. Your reaction, Michael, I know you've written about a little bit of what the senator was speaking of this week.
Yeah, I had the privilege of covering Senator Schmitt when he was Attorney General in Missouri. And it's just amazing to me what a force of nature he's become in his quiet way in D.C. in just a very short time as a U.S. Senator. He, as Missouri Attorney General, filed a landmark case, Missouri versus Biden, on the Biden censorship of conservatives online. And now in D.C., he's holding the reins of hearings and apparently an investigation into that censorship. And so it's a great transition for him. And then he's also fighting the Russia hoax, which he references often. And that's simply the biggest scandal in American history. So it's great to have people like that on it.
Josh, if you had a reaction, I don't know if you had anything to add about the Eric Schmitt visit. It was a good one. Anytime you get a United States Senator to come sit in the confines of our building, it's always nice. A couple of phrases he used that I thought were really important. One is at the end there, he said that what they did to this country was 100 times worse than Watergate. That should be very alarming to Americans, even if it's half true, and it's more than half true. He also used the word authoritarian impulse, talking about those on the left who are using lawfare against or for their political gain. And also, I loved what he talked about restraint and a North Star. He said he could have written a book on all of the cases they didn't pursue when he was AG. And I think, boy, I hope the left is listening, because there are times when you don't have evidence and you don't pursue it because you do have a North Star, because you really are concerned about justice. And I thought that was really refreshing to hear from a former Attorney General and a current U.S. Senator. I'd like to also ask you guys, and Michaela, I'll start with you and go around the horn because it's sort of related. Talking with Maggie Little here off the top of the show, Michaela, the idea that the media is somehow stymied or kept at bay or aren't allowed to speak truth to power, that's criticism that I think a lot on the left are trying to level against the Trump administration. But given what Senator Schmitt just said during the Biden administration, it's a little hard to take seriously.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, Eric Senator Schmitt was definitely talking about that history of the Biden administration and their abuse of power. And I think it's so easy to forget what happened and to just be talking about today, and then the press is freaking out about what Trump is doing. But in fact, we have to remember, like Senator Schmitt said, that there was complete abuse of power. And even Maggie Little, our reporter in D.C., the fact that she got to go into the Oval Office is talking to President Trump face to face is incredible. And the Trump administration has invited in new media, is constantly circling the media through and having press conferences and always updating not only the media but the public, as she talked about through his Truth Social posts and everything. They're constantly engaging with the public, and we just have to remember and compare that to the previous Biden administration and how we didn't even know, we hardly saw the man at a few days at a time, and it was just, is he even alive? Sometimes we were asking, and we can't forget that.
Michael, I don't want to brush past it. I've been very candid about it on social media and on another show that I host. I'm not skirting the issue. If you're sensitive to what's gone on, say, this week at the Pentagon as a journalist, I'd love to hear it. Do you have cause for alarm that the media is not being given full access to this administration? No.
Oh my gosh, no. Back in the day, I covered a federal courthouse and a state courthouse too. And I had pretty much free reign. I could, in the local courthouse, I could walk in where the employees are, walk into the vault, get the files out, and just read the criminal affidavits that had been filed. And then after a bunch of, criminal and terroristic acts around the country toward government, they had to cut down that access. But, you don't have a right to just roam the hall as a reporter at the Pentagon or anything like that. And the thing is about the White House press corps, I think it'd be a mistake not to recognize the tremendous historic significance of what Donald Trump has done in opening up that press corps to people who don't think like the Washington establishment or the liberal media. He's balanced the media coverage of him. He did that. And nobody else has done that. And it just seems like something that should bleed over into the culture in general.
Josh, as a long-tenured journalist yourself, I'd just love to get your thoughts on this. The Pentagon rules for the media. A lot of media marched out of the Pentagon today, said we're not going to, or this week, and said we're not going to abide by this. We're not signing this thing. And that included Fox News. That included Newsmax. The Federalist, I know, they said, we're fine with this, and by the way, spare us your outrage after all of the fraudulent reporting all of you have done over the years. Your thoughts?
Yeah, what I can say is I've been sort of at the helm here at headquarters on those days when Maggie's suddenly ushered into the Oval, and I'm scrambling, and we're working on questions, and it's amazing. Our publication is just 4 years old. We've grown by leaps and bounds, but it's still amazing. We're in the White House. We're talking to the most powerful executive in the world about issues that are important to us and our audience. And so our audience needs to feel really proud about that too. It's an incredible opportunity for new media. And listen, I don't have any problem if journalists want to express their displeasure with an administration's decisions about how it handles the press. I think we've laid out examples of how this administration is transparent. And so I think we'll just have to keep watching and see how they respond. But I don't like the idea of press leaving the Pentagon. I mean, that actually seems like, well, now I am a little concerned. Who's there covering it? And so, we'll just have to wait and see.
We'll continue to watch it at readline.com. A couple of other stories I wanted to get on quickly before we move on to Faith and Freedom 250 this week, and that is, Michaela, our Teachers of the Year. There are some remarkable people doing great things in the space of Christian education. We continue to profile those folks at readline.com. What do you know?
I greatly enjoyed covering the story and writing the story on a special education teacher, Jessica Valenti, and it was just beautiful to hear her story. I actually have a disabled brother. He's my eldest brother, and so talking to her was really encouraging, and she talked about the impact that this program has in her school and how even the kids and other teachers are responding to these students with disabilities. So I just wanted to thank her and say that it was a profound encouragement and really enjoyed writing that, but also personally can speak to as a testament of how much that means to families with disabled children. They want them to be involved in schools, and those children have such an impact. They bring a joy and a light that is so unique, and I just really encourage all Christian schools to have that program or invite students and welcome them in if they can, because it will really change the culture of your school.
Great stuff. And Michael, finally, I suppose we could probably do this every week. Public schools behaving badly. You have a hodgepodge of stories all related to that subject this week.
Yeah, my colleague Josh here calls it area schools behaving badly. On the Kansas side of Kansas City, you have a district, Gardner Edgerton USD 231, where a school board candidate on Charlie Kirk's Day of Remembrance went online and really blasted Charlie using, debunked and out of context quotes, and some that were actually the opposite of what he was saying, to smear Charlie Kirk as a racist. In another story, that same district had a situation where there was a rumor that there was a boy, a biological boy, using a girl's locker room for months last school year in the fall, and a parent was doggedly determined to find out if it was true. The district stonewalled this parent and even the publication I work for about a month, and then this parent managed to get an open records request email internally at the district that admitted it did go on. And so that was interesting. You have to wonder why the secrecy and why not the transparency. And then the third story, we've been receiving reports of TP USA, Turning Point USA, High School Club America chapters, they call them, having some real pushback and difficulty getting recognized or accepted at their schools. We had reports of administrative pushback and bullying and harassing by perhaps some of their peers. And so that's, it's just not easy to start a conservative club these days.
These stories, all of these, and so much more every day, as Josh was mentioning a little while ago, and constant breaking news, we've got them all updated and regularly all day long at readlion.com. Panel, it's great to catch up with you. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you back at the ranch next week. And when we get back on the Lion Week in Review, we always like to celebrate this approaching 250th birthday of the country in a segment we call Faith and Freedom 250, when the Lion Week in Review comes back.
Welcome to Faith and Freedom 250, a special series from the Herzog Foundation exploring America's Christian heritage. Today we turn to 1962, when the U.S. Supreme Court issued a ruling that would reshape American culture. Engel versus Vitale, the decision that banned even voluntary prayer in public schools.
Students learned in high school that the Supreme Court was established to interpret the laws of our nation. Sometimes, however, the decisions rendered by this branch of government do far more than interpret the law. In essence, they frequently redefine the direction of policy for decades. One such ruling occurred in the case of Engel versus Vitale on June 25, 1962. This case came from New York, where the State Board of Regents created a voluntary prayer to be used in public schools. Participation was optional, and there was no evidence it was ever compulsory. The prayer was also written to be non-denominational and simply read, "Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. Amen."
Yet a lawsuit was filed against the New York State Board of Regents. The case worked its way to the United States Supreme Court. The plaintiffs claimed the prayer violated the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. The First Amendment has two distinct parts dealing with religious freedom. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Those 15 words contain both the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. Two of the plaintiffs, including Stephen Engel, were Jewish. One was an atheist, one was a Unitarian church member, Another belonged to the New York Society for Ethical Culture. They argued that even a voluntary prayer violated the Establishment Clause when applied to the states through the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection under the law. In a 6-1 decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Engel, declaring that prayer in public schools, even voluntary, non-denominational prayer, was unconstitutional. This decision set the stage for other public institutions to be banned from promoting or endorsing prayer and had monumental as well as lasting implications. The decision, led by Chief Justice Earl Warren, became a classic example of judicial activism, the court moving beyond interpretation into legislation from the bench. This decision also strayed far from the original intent of the First Amendment. It was clear in the writings of the Founding Fathers, including the Federalist Papers, that the Establishment Clause was crafted to prevent the federal government from establishing a national church, not eliminate prayer from public life. The founders of the United States sought to create an open and free society.
That same American generation was steeped in the tradition of religion, not only in classrooms, but also present in 4 founding documents and within the law itself. Religious communities had founded and staffed America's first schools. The founders themselves had benefited from education that relied on the Bible and Judeo-Christian lessons. They were often taught by the same clergy who preached on Sundays at local churches. Therefore, prayer had ever been present in their scholastic lives.
Thomas Jefferson had included multiple references to an all-powerful God in the Declaration of Independence. In its very fight for existence, the Continental Congress had implored God's aid in its revolutionary cause. The Northwest Ordinance tied, quote, religion, morality, and knowledge, end quote, together in its vision for America's expansion. And the Constitution, in the very same amendment used to strike down prayer in public schools, protected free exercise of religion. George Washington added the words, "So help me God," to his presidential oath, and every president since has placed a hand on the Bible to become the chief executive. Leaders of this nation have put forth some of the most famous intercessory prayers to God in American history. Congress itself has always begun its sessions with prayer. Despite the prohibition levied by the Supreme Court in Engel versus Vitale in 1962, Congress has continued to open in prayer. From the foundation of the Republic up to the very present day, it has been clear that American leaders have valued the inclusion of religion in their proceedings. To the Christian faithful, the Engel ruling contradicted not only America's rich history of religion and public life, but the moral fabric of the nation itself.
The lone dissent came from Justice Potter Stewart, who wrote, "I cannot see how an official religion is established by letting those who want to say a prayer say it. To deny the wish of these school children to join in reciting this prayer is to deny them the opportunity of sharing in the spiritual heritage of our nation." The Engel ruling triggered a wave of similar cases. In 1963, the court banned the Lord's Prayer and Bible reading in public schools. Soon after, moments of silence and clergy at graduations were prohibited. By the turn of the century, even school-endorsed prayer at athletic events was outlawed. Engel versus Vitale set America on a path of removing prayer, morality, and religion from public life. Opponents of the ruling called it a turning point, the beginning of cultural decay, moral confusion, and the erosion of right and wrong. Without the compass of faith, American identity itself began to change. Our founders knew this danger. That's why they took great care to protect religious freedoms first and foremost among all the other rights that they enshrined in our Bill of Rights. But in 1962, the court took the text of the First Amendment in an entirely different direction. Engel wasn't just a court case. It symbolized how far America had drifted from what our founders intended when they crafted the revolutionary documents that formed a nation unlike any other in history. For many Americans, it was more than a legal defeat. It was a loss of an identity and of freedom. The national motto of the United States still reads, "In God we trust." And yet, children aren't allowed to pray to Him in public schools. It is inconsistencies such as this which have led to a new revolution in American school systems in the decades following the Engel case.
The Engel versus Vitale decision marked more than the end of prayer in schools. It symbolized a turning point in America's struggle over faith, freedom, and our national identity. At the Herzog Foundation, we believe that America's Christian heritage is the foundation of true liberty. Join us again on Faith and Freedom 250 as we continue to tell the story of our nation's Christian roots.